Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Monday, March the 22nd, 2021. On this edition of the Politicrat, good news and news. A look at the events over the last couple of days in the news that you may have missed, plus what we can expect in the news this week, as well as some positive things that have happened recently. All of that coming up next. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your weekend. If you had any semblance of one, because all of these days seem to just run into each other. It's a very strange feeling about time, especially with the pandemic that continues to hold us hostage in some ways. It's probably not the best way to assess it, but it is one way to assess it. This pandemic has really put us into ways of thinking, I hope, about some of the things that we perhaps don't usually think about. And for some of us, it's more of the same. For others of us, this is the first time that we've really dealt with something like this. And yet for still others of us, it is a hugely trying time. One that is certainly pushing the bounds of anything. I mean, mental health, which doesn't get talked about the way it should here in the United States or in the United Kingdom or in a number of other countries, is not being addressed at all, really. I mean, we have just had a mass shooting and execution of 7 women, 6 of whom are Asian, and a total of 8 people overall in the Atlanta area in the southern United States. And it's almost gone off the pages of the news. It's practically gone. It happened last Tuesday night, just 6 days ago. It's really horrifying in that way, how we process an event or barely process it before the news cycle and the news media moves on, and it's already moved out of the consciousness of a large majority of people in the United States. And quite frankly, there are people who are dealing with their own set of challenges, and so this adds more pain. And yet, because this pandemic has really amplified a lot of things that were already known and have added some real challenges to many millions of people's lives. The massacre last week, the execution last week of 7 women and 1 man, 6 of those women Asian, it's almost gone from people's minds. In some really perverse way, the president and vice president speaking about the horror of what happened last Tuesday in the Atlanta area, perhaps for people, or at least some people, has put a bow on everything. And it certainly hasn't, because, of course, as you well know, you've got families left to deal with the trauma and horror of no longer having their mother or their father or brother or sister with them. They've lost them forever. And they have to try to somehow pick up the pieces. I don't know how someone does that. How do you do that? I think one of the things that helps reassure in these times, and it certainly does me, and I do say this from time to time here, is that there are good people in the world. And at times, one can lose sight of that. Sometimes I lose sight of that, but I know that there are many, many millions of good people in the world. And usually, not in every instance, but usually that can be found when there are real horrors, such as this one, such as what happened to Tatiana Jefferson, or Breonna Taylor, or George Floyd, or Sandra Bland, or Michael Brown, or Tamir Rice, or John Crawford III, or Philando Castile, or Rekia Boyd, or Eric Garner, or many, many others, is that you get this outpouring of support from those who you had no idea even cared or even existed. We saw the protests almost a year ago now, all around the world, in support of George Floyd and his family, and in support of justice. So for anybody who thinks that there aren't millions of people on this planet who care, you can just look at Exhibit A. And that exhibit was last year, last summer, into the fall, all over the world. Protests, protests, protests. Another reminder of this for me, dear listener, was something I came across earlier today, actually. And that was the news of the situation for a family that had been one of those who'd lost their loved one in this execution of people in the Atlanta area. And one of those persons was the mother of Randy Park. And I mention Randy Park because I mention him because this is an example of what I'm saying here in these few minutes. Just 3 days ago now, Randy Park set up a GoFundMe page for his mother, Hyung Jung Kim, who was killed by a white male terrorist in this terrorist attack on Asian women and on people in the Atlanta area community, and an attack on all of us. Randy Park is the son of Hyung Jung Kim, and Randy Park created a GoFundMe page for his mother to support both he and his brother, to pay for funeral expenses, to pay for coverage of business affairs, and all kinds of other financial obligations that now were really coming up thick and fast. The initial call was for $20,000. $20,000. As of this recording of this episode, the GoFundMe page that Randy Park created just 3 days ago has now raised $2,784,630. There have been almost 73,000 donors. Now, this was just 3 days ago. The goal was $20,000. And again, as of this recording, it's almost $3 million. That is an example of good people in the world. You cannot deny that when horror and tragedy and outrage strikes that devastates a family, a community, a nation, a planet, people respond and they give from their hearts. And yes, it is a sad thing that it usually comes in these kinds of dire circumstances and horrific circumstances. And one would wish, of course, that we do say to each other hello. I mean, before this pandemic, that was one of my little complaints, was that why don't people say hello to each other? It's not an invitation to, go to dinner with you. It's just hello. It's reflecting and acknowledging someone's humanity. It's akin to what the new Housing and Urban Development Secretary received last week, and I'll play the audio for that in the next block so that you'll understand what I'm talking about. And it reflects my whole thing too, is that we just don't acknowledge each other. I mean, we don't. And in some parts of the country, people do. And parts of California, people will say hello. I know around here they do sometimes. But it's just a situational thing. It's sometimes on a Sunday, you will get lots of people coming up to you who say hello to you. And then on another Sunday, no one will. You say hello and then they don't say anything. People don't feel like saying hello. There's lots of things, lots of reasons. But in this particular situation, millions of people said hello to Randy Park and said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your loss. And here's my way of showing that I love and support you, and that I care about you and I care about your pain. All of that is to say, dear listener, that if you can afford any kind of donation at all, please donate some money to Randy Park's GoFundMe page. I will put a link to it in the liner notes of this episode. That page can best be seen in the liner notes if you are listening to this on Apple or Spotify, for example. I believe Pandora as well, and other platforms where you can actually properly see the links and you can properly see the information. There will be a link to that GoFundMe page. And of course, there are other GoFundMe pages. I would invite anybody to go to the GoFundMe pages for George Floyd, if there are any, and make sure that they are authentic. The Breonna Taylor Foundation at breonnataylorfoundation.org. I will put a link also to that foundation. I believe it's .org. It could be .com, but I'm going to put a liner notes link to that foundation as well. And there are ways that you can donate to Breonna Taylor's foundation. I'm going to put a link to George Floyd as well. And because sometimes the GoFundMe pages are not verified and confirmed, I can tell you, though, that Randy Parks is an authentic GoFundMe page. And please donate to it. Please donate. I mean, donate to Randy Parks' page in memory of Hyun Jung Kim to support my brother and I. That's the name of the GoFundMe page. And I said I'm going to put a link to it. Please also support the Breonna Taylor Foundation and donate to that foundation. Tamika L. Palmer is the mother of Breonna Taylor. I would like you, please, if you can spare some change, literally. It could be $1, it could be $5, it could be $10, it could be $20, it could be $50, whatever you can spare at all. Please donate to Breonna Taylor and to Randy Park and to George Floyd. Please, please, please do it. I mean, again, I've donated money to these various places I've just named for you. And it doesn't have to be hundreds of dollars. You know, it doesn't have to be $50, whatever you can afford. I know it's difficult now with this pandemic. Economically, people are really under strain. And even with the American Rescue Plan, it's a nice start for many people, but obviously more needs to continue to be done. It really does. And there's got to be more for people. People are still standing in food lines. Let us not forget that there are still millions of people across the United States who are standing in lines for food. That is not being reported anymore, but it is still going on. So I understand people may not be able to afford anything. Whatever you can afford will be of help. And believe me, it's really valued by the families of these three people. And there are other, of course, GoFundMe pages for people who have lost loved ones. And my focus, though, is on these three individuals that I've just mentioned, Hyun Jung Kim, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor. Because this is really what we have to do. It's springtime. And hopefully, hope springs eternal. And hopefully, people can open their hearts up a little bit more. It's tough, though. I mean, I'm not going to sit here, dear listener, and pretend that everybody can do this. Because as I've said, there is a lot of economic strain. And if you can't supply any money, make sure that you send some positive wishes and support and love to these three families. Whether it's to Randy Park, who is the son of Hyun Jung Kim, whether it is to the George Floyd family, whether it is to Tamika Palmer, who is the mother of Breonna Taylor. We have to start connecting. And as I always say, or at least I say from time to time, we must show empathy and compassion to fellow human beings. We must. And of course, you would hope that, God forbid this happened to you or anyone in your family, you would love to and like to think that the people that you donate to are going to also do the same. It's not always that way. And as I have also said, please, because other people may not be supporting what you do, as frustrating and as maddening as that certainly is, do not let what someone else does not do stop the goodness in the heart of what you do. You cannot allow someone's failure to support your cause and your predicament and your tragedy to dictate whether or not you have the goodness of heart to support theirs or someone else's. Yes, we all would like everybody to support our causes. But we all know, dear listener, that that is not the way the world works. As maddening and as annoying and as frustrating as that is, we know the world does not work that way. For we know that human beings do not work that way. I really do think you will feel better if you give to others in need. And Randy Park, the family of George Floyd, the family of Breonna Taylor, and many others will really thank you for it. As Benjamin Mays, who was a mentor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., once said in his 10 Commandments of Success, pity those who abuse you and ask you why you give so much in return for so little. Those who give less receive less.
Thank you very much, Jen. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oh, thank you. I was wondering if I was in this room by myself.
Welcome back. That was housing. That was Housing and Urban Development Secretary Marcia Fudge late last week in the White House press briefing room. Dearie me. As promised, I said that I would play that for you in this second block, and there it was, as you just heard. And this is what I'm talking about. You walk into a room, you say hello to people, and they don't even say hello back to you. And I know this happens a lot with the White House press corps, and not just them. Of course, it happens in all walks of life. You go to your workplace, you have a conference room meeting, and the person says good morning, whether it's a teleconference or whether it's in a conference room before this pandemic, in the same room, and you're all sitting around the table. The person comes in and says good morning, and hardly anybody says anything, or nobody does. And I just don't I just don't get that. I'm sorry. Where I come from, that is rude. It's just rude. But everybody thinks about these things in different ways. I think about it in my way. You think about it in your way, and someone else thinks about it in another way. And I've always tried. It's not like I spend every waking day thinking about this, or every waking second. But I do sometimes, from time to time, think about why is it that why are we sometimes as people reluctant to just acknowledge somebody? I understand some people might say, well, if I say hello to that person, it may feel, perhaps they may think that I'm flirting with them. Now, in those contexts, I hear that and understand it. But if you're walking, I shouldn't say but I'm saying, yet if you walk down the street and you just say hello to someone as you're passing them, I don't know. I mean, that's different for everybody. But but this has gone on here in the US, and it happens in other countries too. I know it happens in the UK, in some instances in other countries as well. We are just afraid to just acknowledge somebody, it seems. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it is fear, actually. I don't know if it's just, you just want to be left alone. You don't feel like saying hello. I can completely understand those things. Or you're just not in the mood to, or whatever it is, you're just in a bad mood, or you're just, you're preoccupied with the things that are going on in your life, and they're pretty damn serious. Or there's something else and you just don't say anything, which is why a lot of people, I think, walk down the street with AirPods in their ears. Maybe some of that might be they just don't want to engage with the outside world. And I get it. There's days where you feel like, darn it, I want to just shut the world out. And sometimes you do it as a defense because you've got men who are catcalling you, if you're a woman, catcalling you or saying things that are misogynistic, offensive in general, and you just want to block it out. So you walk down the street with AirPods or other headphones in your ears. I get that. That completely understood. I'm talking about things like what you just heard in that audio from this past week. I think it was Thursday of last week. Marcia Fudge comes into the briefing room. She's the brand new Housing and Urban Development Secretary in Joe Biden's administration. Comes into the briefing room. As you heard, good afternoon. Nothing, not a soul says a thing. And then she gives that look that only black women can. The black auntie moment, and puts her hand to her ear or puts her ear out. I'll put a link to this so you can actually see this this video in case you did not catch this video from last week. I played the audio of it just a few moments ago and you heard it. And she kind of gave that look to them, and then they all said good afternoon. She said, oh, good. I wondered if I was the only person in this room. I'm just repeating what you've heard a few minutes ago. I mean, this is the thing. I don't understand it. Why is it so difficult? And maybe I'm some kind of snob or something. And it's very possible that I am. But why can't we acknowledge each other? Pandemic or no pandemic, I get it. It's a pandemic. Who's going to be walking down the street with their 2 masks on, presumably having 2 on or 1, some kind of mask? And I'm still seeing people around here in San Francisco still walking down the street with no mask on. Walking down the street casually, And yes, it's a white person invariably down the street. No, rules don't apply to me. I'm just walking down the street. No mask. Variants running wild. You got variants from here, variants from the UK, variants from Brazil, South Africa, this, that, the other. Oh, I'm just walking down the street without a mask on because I'm so cool and hip. and stupid and selfish. I just don't get it. And then you're in a building, whether it's an apartment building or in a home, your house, and then you walk down the street, and it's probably more true in apartments than it is in houses, but you walk down the street and your neighbor says nothing to you. And you walk down the same street that you know that you and they live on, and you're literally walking out of the building and they're walking toward it, and they know you. And nothing is said. You say hello, they say nothing, or they pretend they don't recognize you. Why do we do that to each other? Maybe, I don't know if you care about that kind of thing. I mean, it's something that I just want to ask you. What do you think that's about? And again, this happens all over the place. Doesn't make it right, of course. And people say, well, in cities, this is the way city life is in America, and in England, in London, this is the way city life is. We don't talk to each other. But why? But let's say that that's true. Why? Why not? Does that make it right? And the optics of Marcia Fudge, the Housing and Urban Development Secretary, coming into a room as a black woman, coming into a virtually all-white press corps, which is what they've always been. It's been 99% white forever in the Washington White House D.C. press corps. What else is new? Like that's the only institution that is not almost all white. And as the optics of a black woman walking in there and saying good afternoon, and none of them saying anything back, it just speaks volumes. And I know there are white officials who walk into that same room, say good morning or good afternoon, and these people sit there and say nothing to them. Doesn't make it right, though, in any situation. It doesn't make it right. I know Jen Psaki walks in, the White House press secretary, as I'm sure she did today, and got nothing from the press corps. I think that's just asinine. Yeah, maybe I'm making a big deal out of it. Maybe I'm not. But I do think there's something about people who don't do that. And I tend to think that it's also not just the rudeness. I think people are raised in a certain way. And I do think some of that does go back to the way your parents, not your parents, dear listener, not necessarily your parents, but the way that some parents bring up their children. I was raised to say please and thank you and good morning, good afternoon, and to not talk to strangers as a kid. But as an adult, saying hello, really? And someone can't say hello back? What? I'm not asking for your hand in marriage. I'm not asking for anything. It's a hello. It's hello, I see you. Hello, I acknowledge you. It's not anything more than that. Now, for some people, perhaps, who you don't want to say hello to, for very good reasons, you may say, no, I'm not engaging. And I'm not saying you just say hello to every single person you see. That's not what I'm saying at all. But my goodness me, I don't know why we as a society do this. And again, it's not limited to the United States. I don't know why we do that. I just don't necessarily think it's really good at all. I really do, especially, again, that clip to me is not only about the situation in the White House press corps, where, you can't say hello. You're going to be asking the Housing and Urban Development Secretary Marcia Fudge a barrage of questions, but you can't say hello to her as she walks into the room and introduces herself. That's such a twisted thing, is that people are so whatever in their jobs that they don't get up and smell the roses or the coffee or anything. But I'm not using that as an excuse for good manners, because I think that there's just a bunch of people in the world who lack manners and good manners. That's just my personal view. I just think they're a bunch of very rude people on this planet. And this is me saying this coming from the first block of this podcast episode where I was talking about how there's so many good people in the world who respond to tragedy. And that remains true. And that remains true. What's also true is that two things can be true at once. Isn't that your favorite phrase now? Your most annoyingly favorite phrase? And two things can be true at once. Well, 8 things can be true at once. 1,000,000 things can be true at once. Of course they can. It's called human beings. It's called life. It's called planet Earth. And that's the thing. I just think also that there are people who are just very rude, who don't have manners, and their parents didn't ever teach them any. And I think that there's a culture of that. And I think the society also breeds that. And a society that doesn't talk about welcoming people. Again, I spoke about this certainly, I think, a few days ago when this massacre happened in the Atlanta area, that we need to start welcoming people. And I certainly spoke about it, I think, yesterday as well, talking about the passing of, the passing of Nawal el-Saadawi, who, my goodness me, what an inspirational figure she was. And I think I mentioned it yesterday in that episode, is that we need to have a culture. I certainly mentioned it on Twitter, at the Popcorn REEL. And I said, we have to have a culture of welcoming people in the first place. Welcoming Asian people in the first place. Now, I get it. There's Lady Liberty there and Ellis Island and, and Liberty Island or whatever. Liberty Island and in New York and whatever the name of the island is. Ellis Island, but, Liberty Island, I guess, is where the statue is. I should know where the Statue of Liberty is in New York. And yes, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe. Free. Oh, right. Yes. But what I'm saying is welcoming, actively, proactively welcoming people. And I'm not just talking about government policy welcoming immigrants. I'm talking about welcoming people. Actively rolling out a metaphorical red carpet to people. That's what I think should be happening, so that we don't have to have all the GoFundMe donations afterwards, because when people are welcomed and there's a clear message that they are being welcomed and supported, hopefully, and the laws are where they are, and there's unlearning and education going on, hopefully, it will help stem the flow of these attacks against Asian people, which are going on right now here in San Francisco and all around the country, but particularly here in California. And there needs to be proactive measures and welcoming of people, so that it's not all done at the end of all the disaster and the pain and the death that happens. We've got to be a more welcoming society. We've got to be a more hello, how are you oriented society. We're not. Because when someone asks us how we are, we just say, oh, we're okay, fine. Quite frankly, I think that people don't really care to sit and listen to somebody's pain and what kind of difficulty they're going through. Sometimes you're in a bus or a train or you're walking and someone suddenly comes up to you, complete stranger, and starts telling you about their problems. That's happened to me. I can't tell you how many times. I'll walk down the street. Hasn't happened lately, of course, with the pandemic. But in the past, I'd walk down the street and you'd have someone come up to you and start telling you all these things about their personal life. Now, again, I'm not going to editorialize on that. I'm just going to leave that as it is. What I am saying is that we need to be a more welcoming, more compassionate, more empathetic society. And I'm talking a human society. I'm not talking about America by itself. I'm talking about around the globe. And in some places around the globe, people are more welcoming than in others. And we need to do that as people. Again, as I keep saying, we can't talk about wanting to change the world and wanting to live in a better world without first asking about what we ourselves are doing to make the world a better place. What are we doing within ourselves to change those things in us that we don't like? Because before you can change a world, you've got to start changing yourself. You've got to want to start to do that. You've got to want to do that. And if you don't, all this other stuff is just a bag of empty potatoes. Welcome back. A potpourri of things in the news and what to expect this week and what is scheduled this week, particularly here in the U.S., news-wise, things you can expect. There is a number of briefings. Proper English. There are a number of briefings this week, as there are every week now. The White House COVID response team has 3 briefings a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays usually, and they have had one today. I will link to that because I think it's important that people do recognize that there are people in the White House who do care. Now with this brand new administration, there are people who care, as we can see. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Walensky are the officials that you'll be hearing from when I link this. I'm not going to play it, but I'll be linking it in this episode. So you can look at that for those of you who want to know the latest updates on what the White House COVID-19 response team is seeing and doing and what the Biden administration is doing. I think that's very important. Stay in touch with that because I will be doing that and I'll be providing updates here. But I do want to supply a link to that briefing so that you yourself can, if you have the time, these briefings are usually around, I think, 20 minutes to half hour max, where they're speaking and then reporters are giving questions and talking to them. And saying hello. They're saying hello to people who are on a video link, and they're saying hello to them. They're saying Dr. Fauci and Dr. Walensky are getting their hellos. But, they're on video link, but Marcia Fudge, the Housing and Urban Development Secretary, right in front of them in the briefing room, no. We won't say good afternoon in response until we're shamed into doing it, until we get that look that only a black woman can give. Then we'll say hello. And she's like 6 feet from them, like 12 feet in front of them in person. But, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Walensky on video link, hello. Do you understand you get what I'm driving at here? Oh, we are something, aren't we? Oh, dear. Anyway, all of that is to say, dear listener, that I will supply a link to the Monday White House COVID-19 response team briefing, the COVID-19 response team briefing, and you can get to listen and watch that for yourself. Also, there is news about President Biden saying he will visit the southern border, quote, at some point in the near future. No specifications on when that will be in the future or the near or far future, but it is something that he has expressed. Also, in the House this week, there is a hearing going on, started today, on D.C. statehood legislation. I think that's a very important thing. There is also a push. Why not have D.C. be a state? It absolutely should be. Absolutely should be. There's also some other news, including the Voting Rights Act push in the Senate. I know they've been debating it in the Senate, on the Senate floor the last week or so, and it needs to be voted on for real. And let's get that done if it hasn't already. If it has been done, it certainly slipped my radar. But we've got to do that. The Supreme Court in the United States hearing oral arguments on a number of cases. In the next 3 months, we will start to see the big Supreme Court decisions as the Supreme Court term ends for this year, for the 2021 year, the October term of 2020, as it were. And we will be hearing the decisions start to come in. We will start to find out in the next few months, particularly as we get to June, is when you really get the big decisions coming in, including, dear listener, California v. Texas, which is a very important case. It's about Obamacare and about whether or not Obamacare is going to be stripped. Seriously, I'm not kidding. I want to remind people that that is something that is really on the table. And people may have forgotten that just 1 week after the presidential election, which was held, of course, on November the 3rd, but 1 week later on November 10th, the United States Supreme Court heard oral arguments for the case California versus Texas. And the folks in Texas, they want to get rid of Obamacare altogether. So that's a decision that is expected to come down sometime in May or June of this year. So as we are in spring and the first Monday of spring, and as we are almost at the end of the first quarter of 2021, good grief, keep in mind that these decisions are coming, and please pay attention to them. I will be talking about them as they come and having some guests on as well to discuss. There will be some guests coming up in the near future on this podcast. So rather than listening to me, rather than listening to moi only, you will be able to soon have others to listen to, and some of the guests that I look forward to speaking to coming up. And I think one of the things we will be doing as these decisions get nearer and they come is to have people who are vested in this line of work in the United States Supreme Court, people who analyze the court much more closely than I do as an attorney, who will speak to the implications of these decisions as they come. And one reason I mentioned California versus Texas is because for those of you who do not have any health care at all, and even with the issues that Obamacare does present for some people, I do want to let you know that you can sign up right now for affordable health care, or I should say more affordable health care, or I should say less expensive health care. Probably the best way to put that. At healthcare.gov. That's healthcare.gov. If you are in the United States of America and you do not have any health care of any kind whatsoever, I urge you to sign up for the Affordable Care Act protections of Obamacare. Go to healthcare.gov right now and sign up. You can do so now up through, I think, early May of this year. But please don't wait until early May to do this. You've got to do it now. You really do. To whom it applies. Some protection is better than none at all. And it's better to be protected, at least to the best of your ability when it comes to health care, than if you're left in this pandemic without any health care whatsoever. And I know that there are millions of people in this country, this here country called the US of A, who do not have any kind of health care whatsoever. And we have a pandemic going on. And we have all of these anti-vaxxers, these toxic human beings, or people who do not wear masks. We have these protests in London over the weekend. People, hundreds of people, maybe even thousands of people marching through the streets of central London with no masks on. Virtually none of them had masks on. In a pandemic where you've got UK strains, people in England, in the United Kingdom, are walking around with no masks on and in large groups. No masks on. Anyway, that's just the thing. So for those of you here in the United States, please, if you don't have any health care, please sign up for it at healthcare.gov. You've got until I think the first week of May. I'm not 100% sure, but for those of you who know someone who needs health care, who doesn't have it, and is not aware of this website, healthcare.gov is the place to be. It's the place to go and sign up right now. There are other news items in Bristol in England yesterday. There was a full-scale, you could say uprising, you could say riot, whatever you pronounce it as or characterize it as. It left, put it this way. People who want to kill this bill, this horrible bill that would give police these draconian powers in England, and beyond, I think, but certainly in England, marched to demonstrate their disapproval with it. And then what happened is you had some people start to burn police cars, set them on fire. And of course, that was all that the news focused on, and not the point about how draconian the bill was, because of course, a few people decided to spoil it for everybody. And then it makes you wonder, are these people just agent provocateurs, or are they people who are just looking for trouble, or both? And it's a shame because it does spoil the message. And then everybody gets tarred with the same brush. They get painted with the same brush. And that is what happens. You do have agitators who may be hired by police to do this. This happens certainly over here in the U.S., where people infiltrate groups. I mean, God, that's been happening since before the 1960s, or during the 1960s, certainly, with J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO in the FBI, which spied upon people in the human rights and civil rights movement, spied upon Malcolm X, spied upon Dr. King, spied upon Medgar Evers and Angela Davis and all kinds of people. I mean, this is a fact. This has happened. This is not... this is all documented. My goodness gracious, there's a documentary out, maybe streaming now, called MLK FBI that details this. And there's a billion books in the world that do as well. So, again, I mean, I don't know what happened with that in Bristol in England, but it certainly was not good, because it does tar the message of those people who walked out there demonstrating peacefully, and then you had a few violent people. And again, it's like these police who did all this violence in Clapham Common just a week or two ago, in London, in South London, where women are just going to pay their respects to Sarah Everard, and all of a sudden you got these police completely, putting their knees in their backs of these women, and they've got handcuffs on, and I mean, it's just horrendous. It's just horrible. And so, no, I do not condone the actions of people who are burning up police cars and all that. That's not going to get the message across. I mean, it might make people feel good. It just does not get the message across. It's not something that should be done. I completely condemn it. It's just not the right thing to be doing. It's just not. No matter who it was that set these things on fire or committed violent acts, it totally gives the police license not only to continue doing violent things, but it also gives those in government, in parliament, justification to vote for things like this draconian bill that gives police all these powers to just break up protests and deem any protest to be illegal. I mean, this is what has happened here in some cases with the Patriot Act. I mean, it's just this bill in England, and I believe it actually has already been voted on. It's just horrible. The police in England now are really trying to emulate police here. And that is not a good look. We've had so many issues in England with police killing unarmed black people, or killing anybody black, or anybody who's brown. It's really not on. It's really not on. There have been I think there's one or two white people who have also been killed by police in England as well. It's just not on. This kind of thing It's got to end. It's got to end. So that's another development. We'll see what's happened. The Home Secretary in England, Priti Patel, in Boris Johnson's cabinet, who is really someone who shouldn't even have that job. I've told you about how she violated the ministerial code in England and how a civil servant of nearly 50 years had deemed it as such. She clearly did in her bullying of civil servants. And yet Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, overruled the longtime civil servant, forcing him to resign immediately after that overrule of his official position, that advisory one, nonetheless, but official, that said, here is my recommendation. She violated the code. And when you violate the ministerial code as a politician in England, in Scotland, in Wales, in Northern Ireland, in any part of those 4 nations of the United Kingdom, you are presumed to summarily resign. You have to resign. It's basically a mandate that you resign your position. It is expected of you to resign forthwith, to stand down. And of course, no, Priti Patel, she didn't stand down. It was actively, let's form a circle, a square around the Pritzker. That's what was being WhatsApped by the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to his inner circle. Let's form a square around the Pritzker. That's how he describes Priti Patel, who is the Home Secretary. She today went through faced questions about the way police dealt with the events in Bristol last night and the way that the events unfolded and what happened. So that will be interesting to look at. There's a number of other things. The House and Senate will be taking up here in the U.S. a number of different things coming up, and I will get into more of those as they unfold. And I just want to remind you, dear listener, that you can go right now to the Politicrat Daily Podcast online store for the Spring Spectacular Collection. So many items, and in general, check out the store. Check it out at the-politicrat.myshopify.com. That's the place to go. More merchandise is coming in. It's coming in at just, can't even keep up. There's so much that comes in here to the store. And man, oh man, I got to tell you, you're going to really love what you see at the store. And more products are going to be posted as they arrive. And I really do invite you, dear listener, to support the store. Buy, and buy. And I thank those of you who have already purchased items from the Politicrat Daily Podcast online store. It is greatly appreciated, greatly valued. Thank you very much. Grazie. Thank you so much. Danke. Thank you so much. Really, I do appreciate each and every one of you who have purchased items from the store. There's lots of different things. It's not just t-shirts. I know t-shirts are a bulk of what you see in the store, a part of what you see in the store, a large part, but there's hats, hoodies, sweatshirts, long sleeve t-shirts, mugs, excuse me, I'm choking up here, pens, mouse pads, tote bags, so many things. On the way, there's some socks even that, yes, socks, which I will soon be wearing, I hope. It depends on if the sizes are correct, but that's going to be posted soon. There's so many things. And I'm just so proud of the store and all of these things designed by yours truly. My goodness me. Where do I get the time? Well, I make time. And I just thank you for your time. Thank you for your purchase. And I thank you for listening to this edition of the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.